Hey everyone, it's Carson Tech here, back with another video, and in this video I'm going to be checking out the VanTrue N4 Dashcam system, which is special in that it has a total of 3 cameras in the system. There are no other dash cams on the market that I know of right now that have 3 dash cams. So this one specifically, it's got a forward-facing camera, an interior-facing camera, as well as a rear-facing camera. And so in this video, I'm going to be going through an unboxing. I'll be going through a full-on installation and how you tackle an installation of a 3-camera system like this, as well as a full-on review of what I think about the system and whether or not it is worth the 250-ish US dollars that you pay for a system of this magnitude. So with that being said, let's jump right into the unboxing. For full transparency's sake, considering I got sent the VanTrue N2 by VanTrue a couple of years ago for review, I do want to note that I did purchase this system entirely with my own money. They did not send me this unit. I just purely thought that the first product was great, so I decided to pick up this on top of that to upgrade my system. So
that aside, immediately on the top you'll get the usual documentation such as a manual, quick start guide, and some follow us cards. Below that on the left side of the box is the main dash cam, which is the brains of it all, and right out of the box the first thing that I noticed was that the screen is much larger than previous VanTrue dash cam models, which, coming from my future self here who has already experienced this screen in action, the larger display is extremely helpful when trying to get information about what's going on while driving, or even when simply changing a setting. Flipping the camera over on the rear, or rather front, you'll see the main camera, which is capable of shooting up to 4K at 30 frames per second, as well as the interior adjustable camera, which is able to shoot up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. The rear camera that you'll see in just a little bit can shoot at 1080p 30 frames per second as well. Altogether, when you have all the cameras enabled, it will require the main camera to drop its resolution to 1440p at 30 frames per second, but both of the other cameras still maintain their respective max resolutions of 1080p 30 frames per second. On the left side of the camera is the location of a reset button, USB-C port for plugging in the rear camera / plugging the camera into a computer to view files, micro HDMI port for video output, and finally the micro SD card slot, which supports cards up to 256 gigabytes. For myself, I opted to use a 256 gigabyte SanDisk high endurance card, which is built for dash cams. Moving to the back of the camera, on the bottom is where the microphone is located, as well as a seemingly random IR sensor. On the top, there's a menu / incident marking button, OK button, mic mute / left button, picture-in-picture adjustment / right button, and finally the power button. Above all is the slot that accepts the suction cup mount that comes in the box. Speaking of, let's get back to what else is included in the box. Next to the camera on the right is the 20-foot long USB-C cable that runs to the rear camera as well as the rear camera itself. This camera mounts with 3M adhesive, and you get a second one in the bag just in case you mess it up or the adhesive fails over time. The camera is able to rotate freely 360 degrees, so no matter where you have to mount your rear camera, you'll be able to get the angle you need. Next up out of the box on the bottom left is the 11.5-foot long power cable, which has a USB-C end for the camera, but mysteriously only has a USB-A female plug on the 12-volt plug for charging external devices. I would have liked to see a USB-C plug here, but whatever. On that plug is an annoyingly bright blue light, but you can have a look at that later. Finally, for in the box is the suction cup mount as well as a USB-C to USB-A cable for connecting the camera to a computer. The included suction cup mount works wonders and is what I used for my prior VanTrue camera, but I opted to purchase the $25 GPS mount, which will allow my N4 to record GPS coordinates as well as my speed into the footage. With everything out of the box, let's move over to the installation of the system. Overall, it wasn't terribly difficult, mostly just tucking away wires, but if you want everything to look nice and professionally done, it may take you a little bit longer than you'd think. To start, before you even think of tucking away a wire or mounting the camera, I would highly recommend plugging everything in, including the rear camera, and then powering everything on to make sure that the N4 is functioning properly. The last thing you'd want to do is go and spend an hour or so tucking away and fishing wires nicely and neatly throughout your vehicle to end up finding out a cable is bad or a camera isn't working when you plug everything in after you're done. You will need to go and set up the camera first as well as format the SD card in order to see the displays, but that was a piece of cake and really easy to do. I would have loved if the screen was a touchscreen though, which for its size was something that out of instinct I tried to do, but quickly found out only the buttons on the top of the camera actually change anything on the screen. Anyways, after that, you'll want to figure out where the camera best fits on your windshield. Definitely try to get the camera as close as possible to the center, but if you have a vehicle like mine that just so happens to have a lane keeping assist camera or something of the likes right here in the middle of the windshield, you may not be able to get away with completely having it in the center. In my scenario, I found a good position to be on the right of center so that I could twist the suction cup into place as well as have the camera as high up as possible and out of view for me as the driver. Then, once you have the suction cup / main dash cam mounted, you'll need to go and plug in the power cable and get into tucking the cord. Initially, I was annoyed at the large ferrite bead on the cable end, but after having that tucked under the headboard and later having a few camera falling incidents due to the weather, it did a fantastic job at preventing the camera from pulling down the camera wire all the way over to the passenger side trim like what had happened all the time with my older N2 camera. Anyways, to get the cable run down to your cigarette outlet, you've got two options, one of which will run alongside the trim on the side closest to the windshield and then run along the dashboard down to the floor, or you can cut over along the top of the plastic trim by your headboard and then go alongside the rubber gasket facing the door to run down. The reason I opted for the second method and why you should heavily consider this over the first is because this run allows for the cable to not have to be laying on top of the dashboard, which is something that I struggled with in the past. Once you meet the inside of the door at the bottom of the rubber gasket, I ran my cable in through the side paneling and routed it down to where the passenger's feet go. Down there, I was able to run along the back of the carpeting. I then plugged the power lead into the outlet that I was going to power the camera off of, and from there, I tucked the cable and hid away the excess once again behind the carpet there on the passenger's side. This entire process could be replicated for the driver's side if you so wish, but I personally like to run this cable down the passenger's side, as then I don't have to worry about a wire hindering my ability to move the brake or gas pedals should the cable ever come loose. Next up is the rear camera, which is a little bit more difficult to run the cable for, especially in my 2020 Kia Soul. The first bit is easy. All you've got to do is run the cable out of the camera along the dashboard, down the side paneling to the floor like you did with the power cable, but then this time you'll have to tuck the cable beneath the side door bottom paneling to the rear of your vehicle. It was particularly difficult for me when I got to the second row seating where I had to fish the wire beneath a large plastic piece in order to get the cable to the trunk. When you get the cable back there though, the eventual mounting location for the camera on every vehicle will ultimately be different, but I went for a top of the door mount on my vehicle. If you happen to have an open up style door like this, my method should work for you as well if the door opens close enough to the vehicle body. I was able to run the cable beneath more plastic paneling within the spare tire space, and I did so by removing these two screws and then pulling up the interior rear panel in order to free the 4 plastic fasteners holding the panel in. I've got a note here, it feels like you're going to break something, but if you pull in one quick motion, you will be fine. Also, if you do happen to break one of the fasteners, they are dirt cheap at your local auto store. I also removed these 3 screws in order to get the cable run past them. Finally, I ran the cable up along the rubber gasket for the trunk door and then got it to the top with, no joke, not a single inch to spare in length for the cable. If you have a longer vehicle, I'm honestly not sure how VanTrue expects you to be able to plug this into the rear camera without a cable extension, but I was able to make it luckily enough. After that's done, you're really close to being finished with the installation. I found the middle of my rear windshield and then mounted the rear camera. I would suggest hitting its 3M adhesive with some high heat of a hairdryer or heat gun before mounting, as that will yield the best long-term mounting results. After that, all you have to do now is plug the camera in and make sure that the cable doesn't get pinched when closing the door. I had no issues, so I took the unnecessary step to put some heat shrink tubing on the barrel plugs to make sure they hold together as well as don't let moisture in. You most definitely do not have to replicate this step unless you feel you should in your scenario. And on that note, you will now have a fully installed N4 Pro Dashcam. Verify all the cameras still show up after powering on your vehicle, as well as flipping the display on the rear camera to suit your mounting position if necessary. I'll now pass the talking torch off to future me to talk about my experience with the camera, as well as show off to you some real-world footage from the cameras.
Where should I start? I guess the first spot that would probably make the most sense, that a lot of people are likely interested in, is seeing a little bit more of the interface of the camera. So to start and stop recording, you can press the OK button and go right into menu. So first off, I'm not going to go super in depth here, but just to show you a general idea of everything that this can do. First off, you can change the resolution, and this one is probably the biggest setting that you're going to want to mess with. If you've got all 3 of your cameras plugged in, it will give you the option to record front, cabin, plus rear, and of course that's what I want to do. They give you a ton of different options here as far as resolution goes. The one that I've been shooting with is the main camera is set to 1440p, and the interior and the rear camera are set to 1080p. But I would love if there was some way that the camera would be able to go and record 4K on the main sensor, 1080 on the interior, as well as 720 on the rear. I could compromise for that, but I just do not like 720p recording for an interior camera. It just does not make that much sense. Going back here though, you've got loop recording, IR LEDs, and this is something I want to point out. This by default was not on for whatever reason, so I would recommend turning it on to auto, so then it will flip to turn off during the day and flip on at night. You've got the ability to adjust the G-force sensor. You can turn on or off audio recording. There's a parking mode. So if you're trying to record when your vehicle is off or just parked, then you've got some options here for recording. You can adjust the exposure for each of the cameras, turn on wide dynamic range, change the plate number to match that of your vehicle. You can adjust the stamps that are on the actual footage. Something interestingly enough is that the camera in its own settings has a spelling mistake of its own name. You can also rotate the display and finally record a time lapse. If for whatever reason you want to record a long time lapse, if you're going to be going on a long drive, this would be great for that. Moving back to the main screen, you've got options of system setup, and this is where you can adjust the language, format the SD card, all these things. I'm not going to say all these. You can change your units, and that's it for settings. And then one other thing that you can do in here that may be useful if you want to look at something really quickly is view the files of the camera. You've got the option to see event files, which is if the G-force sensor senses that there's been a hard braking incident or something like that, or you've just simply pressed the incident button to mark it yourself. You can also view normal files, or you can view all of them. So if you open it up, this is what you will see. A camera is your main front camera, B is your interior camera, and C is your rear camera. That's all for in the settings. Again, it would be nice to have a touch screen, but it's not a huge deal breaker, and honestly, once you get the hang of what these buttons do here on the top, you are absolutely fine. Moving on to my general thoughts about the camera though, after having used it now for a little over a month, honestly, it is a huge game changer and is probably one of the best investments I've made so far in this vehicle, because if anything now happens, I've got that peace of mind knowing that I've got the rear camera recording as well as a higher resolution interior camera and outer camera. So overall, I'm really satisfied there. And speaking of that rear camera, it does a generally good job throughout the day, but when it does come to night vision, I've got to say it is not the greatest of the three cameras. And that's mostly because if you think about it, the rear camera doesn't have headlights to go and illuminate the road for it. So it will be able to capture if you're rear-ended or something like that, because obviously the other car coming up to you will have headlights on at night. But otherwise, if you're betting on seeing something after you've passed it with that rear camera at night, it most likely will not be able to show up unless there's a lot of ambient light around. Speaking of driving at night, the other two cameras do phenomenal jobs at night, especially after I went and turned on that IR blaster for the interior camera. It now does a fantastic job. That front camera does a great job at pulling in all the light that is thrown at it and creating a really good image that you're able to see even if it's at night. But aside from night filming, daytime footage from all three of the cameras is stunning. It's good enough that you are easily able to pick out a license plate of somebody like this guy who almost went and ran me off the road or sideswiped me. Also, it's just good in general because it's able to have more light coming into all the sensors, so you're able to see very well. If you're curious as far as what that front camera looks like when it is filming in its full 4K glory, this is what that looks like right now. Obviously, it looks quite a bit better than the 1440p recording, but it doesn't make the most sense to go and purchase this N4 Pro Dashcam and just completely throw out the rear camera. In fact, if you do want to just have the front-facing camera and the interior one in basically the same body minus that rear camera, you can pick up another Reolink camera. I forget the model name right off the top of my head, but here is what that is. So if you want to get that instead, you could go for that. At the end of the day, this really is just a dash cam, and I don't really have too much more to say about it other than the build quality is really good, and even in a crash, I feel like the camera would still hold together. For the price, you are getting a very solid dash cam. The back camera does feel a little bit cheaper than the main one, but even still, it feels very well built. This is just a test so you can hear the microphone if you are interested. And overall, I've been pretty satisfied with everything else about this camera so far. I'm sure I'm talking about it in the video or have already, but it really is quite a nice thing to have that additional rear camera, as well as this front camera that is facing the interior feels to be a bit more wider than the prior camera. It was a little bit of a pain to install, but still, pretty cool. On that note, there are a couple of things that I don't like about the camera, or things that should be changed in the future, and mainly I've got 4 main complaints. To start, the first thing that definitely should be changed is the length of the cable that goes to the rear camera. As you saw, I only had literally maybe like 1 extra inch to spare. I didn't go and stretch out and leave some slack in the cable anywhere else. So it really was down to just a couple of inches in whether or not my camera would have even been able to be plugged in. And the downside with this is that VanTrue does not sell a native extension cable for that cord, but there are some others that are selling online. So if you do need an extension for the cable in your own vehicle, I would try this one out. I haven't tried it myself, but it is just a headphone style cable in the 2.5 millimeter variety. So this cable should theoretically work. But if it doesn't and you try it out yourself, make sure to let me know down in the comments below. Moving on to problem number 2 is that one time when my camera was recording, for whatever reason, it wasn't actually recording. And in fact, I actually encountered an incident where I needed that footage to review it back because I almost got sideswiped, and I went to press the incident button, and on the screen it said that the card was corrupted for whatever reason, but then the card went to proceed the next time I drove and it worked fine. So I don't know if this is on SanDisk's side or VanTrue's side, but nonetheless, the camera does have a speaker inside of it, and if anything like this occurs, I would really appreciate the camera to go and just beep at me to let me know in some way that the camera is not able to record to the SD card, because I'd gladly go and reformat the card or figure it out to make sure that it is recording when I need it. I don't know why it did that, but hopefully it doesn't do it again. My third complaint is that in the box you do not get a hardwire kit. In fact, you got to pay an extra $16 in order to get a hardwire kit. So you are just stuck with the cigarette lighter plug, which isn't the biggest deal because I see most people likely using that method to power it up. But it would have been nice to have a hardwire kit included, because that would have incentivized me more to go and hardwire the camera in without having to use an additional cigarette lighter in my dash. Finally, my fourth complaint is in regards to the ungodly bright blue light on that plug. It is so bright and is honestly pretty much a distraction when you're driving, and so I really wish there was some way to either turn off that light or to go and dim it down. And so if you get this yourself, I would highly recommend going and putting either a black piece of electrical tape over it to just completely shut out that light, or to go and face the plug down towards the ground so then it's not facing up towards you as the driver. Aside from that though, that is all my complaints with the VanTrue N4 Dashcam. I am honestly very happy with my investment here. It will long-term prove to pay off. There have been some times before in the past in my older vehicle where I got rear-ended, or some things happened where I just wanted to have it captured in a moment's notice. So I love knowing that no matter where action is occurring in my vehicle, I can drive in relative confidence, minus that one time that the micro SD card wouldn't allow recording, knowing that I'm able to capture anything that happens to come my way as I'm driving. With that said, that is pretty much it for this video. If you are interested in picking up the VanTrue N4 Dashcam yourself, I will be leaving a link down below in the description to pick that up. If you want to see a future video about my 2020 Kia Soul, definitely let me know down in the comments below if that's something you're interested in. But on that note, that is it for this video. If you liked this, make sure to let me know by clicking the thumbs up button down below, as well as subscribing by clicking that circle right below me to see future videos from me. Also, you can check out my last video by clicking right up there, or you can check out my other VanTrue camera video by clicking down there. That's it for this one. Hope to see you in the next video. Peace.